All right, so reminder, this is how this is going to go. We're going to throw out candidates, and then we're going to analyze those candidates one by one. We're going to get to 2 to 3, usually 3 finalists to move on to where we're going to vote and pick the winner of this year's insert the title. This one is the Carnival Offense, as we've been saying. Qualifications, I think, that we've settled on now to be the Carnival Offense this year, Cincinnati Bengals. Got to have skill position players we want to draft, buy into in fantasy, of course. I think the quarterback, Scott, it's got to be, it's got to be like a plus starter. I think functional is a little bit too low of a bar. I think they've got to be someone that is at least average to slightly above average, above board, right? Bonus if it's a concentrated offense, but I don't think that is a necessary component as we talked about. And of course, we got to have a defense that could be bad enough to force the offense to try to keep up, keep the games interesting. So first candidate I want to discuss is the Atlanta Falcons. And Scott, I was actually saying this, I feel like in January or when the season was ending, that it was on my radar that the Falcons could be a good kind of candidate for this year's Bengals. So let's discuss them here. I think we know some of these skill position players, Scott, are very good. We love Drake London. I am very excited about Drake London's 2025 season. Darnell Mooney was a nice find for them. Bijan Robinson, one of the best running backs in the league. They got depth with Tyler Algier. Kyle Pitts is there. He's Kyle Pitts. I think the key question is Michael Penix. Like, can Michael Penix be that above average quarterback? Not a lot to go off from his rookie season, but based on sort of the glimpses we saw of him towards the end of the year, what sort of quarterback are you expecting to see for the Falcons in 2025?
Yeah, that's the big question here, right? I mean, the transition season for them last year, Zach Robinson was the new offensive coordinator from the McVay tree. They've transitioned finally from Kirk Cousins, who gave us like 3.5 months of horrible football, to Penix at the end of the season. And it's hard to know what they're getting there. Penix came into the NFL in an advanced stage. It kind of spiked late in his college career, but you have a team. We like this, Bijan Robinson is, a lot of people think he's the running back 1 on their board. I have him ranked there ahead of Barkley. I know it's not necessarily everybody agrees with that, but I think that's a consensus view of the landscape at the moment. Drake London, look at what he did the last 8 games, a 1,400-yard pace. He targeted like crazy. We love that. I think you talked about how important you introduce this with, does the quarterback have to be plus? And ultimately, I think the Falcons defense will be bad again. We know last year they didn't have a pass rush. They have a schedule that's going to be mostly indoors. Obviously, all their home games will be indoors. It's going to come down to how good Penix is. If Penix can be even slightly above average, I think the stuff around him is going to elevate him. And I think the defense, I know they tried to address that pass rush problem in the draft, but it's the type of thing that could take more than a year to fix. Last year, they did allow over 400. They didn't get to 400 points themselves, although they just missed despite everything going wrong. I mean, Cousins just looked so washed, and you couldn't run half the playbook, it felt like, because of the physical limitations of Cousins and what makes him comfortable and what makes him uncomfortable. So once you answer the Penix question, you can answer the Carnival question for the Falcons. But even if you don't put the Falcons in the Carnival bucket, I'm going to draft Robinson. I'm going to have shares of Robinson. I'm going to force that issue. And it's going to be when the candidate picks for me to draft is like Drake London and 2 other guys. I feel like London's going to be the guy I press on a lot. He's somebody I think he's already a very good player. I think this is the year he pushes into like the first round conversation for 2026.
I'm completely with you on Drake London. And I think the real key with him, and I've said this a lot, is that last year, the coaching staff really got the role right for him, which is in Arthur Smith's offense, he was just a static X receiver. And like Drake London can do that and he can be great there, but he's such a fluid athlete and such a high-end separator, so good against zone coverage. You want to move that guy around. In fact, Drake London was on the show last year talking about that in the middle of the season, and Kirk Cousins really like expressed that, oh man, like I'm going to pepper him when this guy is in the slot. But when Penix got into the mix, then we saw that too. Like he was still in the slot in the final 3 games on 41% of his snaps, and he got some looks there, but he averaged 16 yards per reception because Michael Penix, those passes were a journey, Scott, but like the downfield outbreaking routes that Kirk Cousins was certainly not going to hit, Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, any of those guys, they weren't hitting Drake London on those routes, but Penix was willing and able to, for the most part, hit those throws. Now, I think he's always going to be kind of a accuracy comes and goes sort of player in Michael Penix. I think he will be a little bit volatile in year 2. But personally, I do think he can be good enough where this offense can be at the level we need for them to be a Carnival team, because I have no faith that the defense is going to be an above average unit in 2025 or really anytime soon. I just don't think they're there from a personnel standpoint. Even if those edge rushers are good that they took in the first round, those guys they're light, they're small. I think they're going to get run over. They play against 3 good run teams within their own division. So I think that, to me, I really want the Falcons to be one of our 3 finalists here, because I want to draft into a lot of these skill position players. I think Penix can be just good enough. Maybe there's more. Maybe the ceiling's higher than I'm sort of saying here, but I think he'd be just good enough to be the type of quarterback we need for this offense to work out.
Well said. And let's just give some props to Darnell Mooney, who's set up where he can have a fair amount of regression from last year and still beat his ADP, because it's just wide receiver 48 at the moment. So there are he's maybe more of a best ball play than he is a seasonal play, but and I know that feels like a cop-out at times to say things like that, but Darnell Mooney's a good football player, and he's overshadowed, of course, by London. He's overshadowed by Robinson. He's maybe even overshadowed by the quarterback situation, but I feel confident he's going to beat his ADP and be a useful player in seasonal, and I think a very useful player as we're doing those best ball drafts as we try to get ready for the season.